3,000 years ago, there were no flush toilets, no porcelain throne, not even running water in the public toilets. So how did the great pharaohs solve this problem? Let's explore the fascinating story behind the shocking truth about the toilets used by the ancient Egyptians. The royal palaces of the ancient Egyptians must have been the epitome of luxury and sophistication, right? How did the architects decorate them? What kind of conveniences did they provide? A walk through the palace revealed a variety of decorations, from colorful paintings depicting daily life and hunting scenes to intricate reliefs illustrating religious ceremonies. The walls were covered in hieroglyphics telling stories of the pharaoh, his exploits, and his connection to the gods. The columns were carved into papyrus plants or lotus flowers, giving the impression of being surrounded by nature. But what about those humble necessities that we take for granted today? What were the toilets like? How did the pharaohs maintain their privacy when nature called? Did the ancient Egyptians have bidets? It's hard to imagine that in those days of opulence, the pharaohs had to resort to such primitive practices. But the answer may surprise you. Archaeological excavations have revealed a hidden secret behind the magnificent palaces. While the rest of the palace was a testament to luxury and refinement, the toilets were a shockingly simple affair. Nothing grand, no gold-plated seats or servants to wipe them clean. The toilets were just holes dug into the ground in the corners of rooms or attached to exterior walls. Some toilets were even built next to the pharaoh's bed. Imagine the sight of a magnificent king lying on a luxurious bed and having to use a toilet just feet away. Despite the inconveniences, the pharaohs seemed resigned to this practice. The royal toilets were typically made of stone and were designed to prevent falling into a hole. They were installed near the main entrance to allow easy access for everyone entering the room. This placement was practical, but would it not have been disturbing to share such a personal space with visitors? It is hard to say exactly what went through the minds of the ancient Egyptians when they placed these toilets in the center of the action. But it was probably more common then for people to accept sharing their living spaces with others. For the general public, toilets were shared facilities in public places like temples, government buildings, and busy streets. These shared toilets were often located on rooftops, in courtyards, or even in the open air. Even though they were shared, the Egyptians tried to make the toilets as private as possible. They were usually built as cubicles with low walls, so people could have some privacy while using them. And in the wealthy households of the upper classes, toilets were sometimes built over the heads of the servants' quarters. In these cases, the waste would be dumped directly into the servants' toilets. However, even for the privileged few, these toilets didn't have all the bells and whistles we're accustomed to today. They were simply holes in the floor that emptied directly onto the streets below. The absence of plumbing or any type of sanitation system must have made these toilets quite smelly and unsanitary. But perhaps the ancient Egyptians were simply more accustomed to these conditions than we are today. And yet, despite the lack of advanced plumbing systems, the ancient Egyptians somehow managed to keep their toilets clean. Toilets were cleaned manually using a wooden device similar to a plunger. Urine was also used as a cleaning agent because it dissolves salts and removes dirt. Even for the rich and powerful, going to the toilet was not a glamorous affair. The lack of plumbing and advanced sanitation systems must have made these toilets quite smelly and unsanitary. Perhaps the ancient Egyptians simply got used to such conditions. Or maybe the inconvenience of these toilets contributed to the fact that many members of the royal court preferred to spend their time elsewhere. After all, who wants to spend hours sitting on a stone slab when there is a much more comfortable spot outside? Another interesting detail is that the toilets were used not only for their intended purpose, but also as seats. Archaeologists have found traces of soot on some toilets, suggesting that people spent a lot of time around them, possibly eating, drinking, or socializing. For example, we know that the famous Queen Nefertiti used a small chair to sit on the toilet. The seat was then placed on top of the toilet hole. Researchers believe that this custom may have originated from a deep respect for the queen. The seats symbolized that she did not need to stoop to such menial tasks as sitting on a stone toilet. However, this is just speculation. We may never know the real reason behind this strange custom. We don't know exactly what kind of materials the ancient Egyptians used for toilet paper. They may have used the leaves of papyrus plants or other types of plants with soft fibers. Another option is that they used pieces of linen or cotton fabric. It is important to note that the Egyptians kept their toilets relatively clean considering the conditions of the time. They used water and sometimes urine to wash themselves after using the toilet. For the general public, going to the toilet was an even more sparkling affair. In many cases, people had to share these facilities with animals, which made it even dirtier and more unpleasant experience. It may seem strange to us now, but the toilets of the ancient Egyptians were a necessary and integral part of their daily lives. Did you know that inside the Great Pyramid of Giza, the Pharaoh's bathroom has been perfectly preserved? Well, it hasn't. We haven't found any toilets in the pyramid. But what would the Pharaoh's bathroom look like? And did the Pharaoh use the toilet the same way as we do today? Let's find out. Welcome to my channel. Now let's step into an ancient Egyptian palace. High white limestone walls, long shady corridors, and the scent of incense still lingers. In a small room, hidden behind heavy doors, archaeologists found something unexpected, a limestone chair, hollowed out in the middle, with a water channel underneath. Yes, that's the royal toilet. In the Amarna Palace, where Pharaoh Akhenaten once lived, excavators recorded details. In many rooms reserved for the nobility, they discovered sinks, drains, and stone toilet seats. Evidence shows that Egyptian kings and queens had a private, clean space to take care of needs that we consider very normal today. But remember, in the ancient Egyptian world, nothing was trivial. Even defecation reflected hierarchy and power. A pharaoh never had to clean himself. The historian Herodotus, describing Egypt, wrote, "There was nothing in Egyptian life that was not related to religion." Perhaps the same was true of the pharaoh's toilet. Servants were specially assigned to take care of these rooms. They kept everything clean, deodorized with natron, a natural salt that the Egyptians also used for embalming. It could even be said that even the king's waste was treated with a certain respect as part of the sacred body. The discovery of the toilets in the palaces led to a series of questions. Were these seats made of stone for everyone? How did they work? What did they look like? How often were they used? The truth is, we don't have a definitive answer to these questions. However, we have some clues. The toilets found are simple, elegant, and reveal a culture that was much more advanced than previously thought. At first glance, they may seem quite similar to modern toilets, but their design is much simpler. The seat is just a slab of stone with a hole in the middle. Some seats are shaped like a basin, while others are designed as square or rectangular boxes with a slightly raised upper surface. Despite their simplicity, the toilets were remarkably well crafted. Made from materials such as limestone and granite, they were durable and easy to keep clean, which was essential in a culture that valued hygiene and cleanliness above all else. In addition to the seats themselves, the Egyptians also developed a sophisticated system of plumbing to ensure that the toilets could be easily emptied and cleaned. The seats were often connected to a network of drains and pipes that carried away wastewater and solid waste. This system allowed the toilets to be used repeatedly without fear of contamination or unpleasant odors. The Egyptians were also aware of the importance of ventilation. Many toilets were installed in rooms with windows or other openings to allow fresh air to circulate and prevent the buildup of unpleasant smells. But how often did the Egyptians use these toilets? The answer depends on who you ask. Some experts believe that the toilets were used daily, while others argue that they were reserved for special occasions or religious ceremonies. What is certain is that the Egyptians believed that maintaining cleanliness was an important part of living a virtuous life. By keeping themselves and their surroundings clean, they were able to show their devotion to the gods and their commitment to their religious beliefs. Despite their importance in Egyptian culture, surprisingly little is known about the actual use of toilets. Most of what we know comes from archaeological evidence, such as the discovery of toilets in tombs and palaces, as well as from works of art and literature that depict people using them. These sources provide valuable insights into the rituals, customs, and beliefs surrounding the use of toilets in ancient Egypt. For example, some toilets were decorated with scenes from mythology or religious texts, indicating that they held a special significance in the religious sphere. Others were located near bathing facilities, suggesting that the Egyptians viewed the use of toilets as an integral part of personal hygiene. Overall, the toilets in ancient Egypt were an integral part of the culture and society of the time. They were not only functional objects, but also symbols of cleanliness, hygiene, and religious devotion. While there is still much that we do not know about their use and significance, the toilets in ancient Egypt continue to fascinate and intrigue us today. And who knows, maybe one day we will discover even more secrets about this mysterious aspect of ancient Egyptian life. If you love discovering incredible facts about ancient civilizations like the Egyptians, then be sure to stay tuned for more videos like this one. Now leave the majestic palace behind. Forget about the luxurious lifestyle of the pharaohs for a moment. Try stepping into a small village on the banks of the Nile. Here, there are no gleaming limestone walls, no hieroglyphic corridors, just low mud brick houses with flat roofs and narrow palm-lined alleys. And in some of the wealthier houses, archaeologists have found simple stone stools. They are stone slabs with a round hole cut into them, placed directly over a small pit. Underneath, sometimes there is a ceramic jar to catch the waste. This is the ancient Egyptian version of a home toilet. It is simple, but it shows that even thousands of years ago, people cared about convenience and hygiene in their daily lives. In the village of Deir el-Medina, where the builders of the pharaohs' tombs lived, this evidence is quite clear. In many houses, the stone toilet stools are still there, a small but authentic trace of life every day. Researchers also discovered traces of coal ash and natron around those toilets. Natron is a naturally occurring salt that was probably used to deodorize, similar to the way we use lime powder today. But not every family is lucky enough to have such a toilet corner. For poor families, the toilet is simply a hole in the ground behouse or sometimes the river bank or the nearby fields. Ancient Egyptians often planted crops right next to the Nile, and those fields also became places to relieve their needs. This was both convenient and contributed to adding nutrients to the fertile land. You can imagine one summer evening, when the whole village was quiet, the farmer quietly walked out to the field. The moonlight poured down on the barley field, and in the quiet darkness, he relieved his needs in the simplest way. No throne, no stone bench, no servants to bring him water to wash himself. Just him, nature, and the endless cycle of life. The contrast is clear. While Pharaoh sat on a stone bench in a palace, while ordinary people sometimes had only a pit in the ground outside, the mighty pharaohs who built huge complexes to ensure their comfortable lifestyle did not bother much about the sanitation systems in the common people as homes. However, they too relieved themselves in the most natural way possible, without the luxury of indoor plumbing or fancy toilets. The magnificent palaces may be long gone, leaving us with only ruins to explore. But these humble toilets, they tell a different story, the story of everyday life, the story of people just like you and me, who lived, loved, and laughed, who worked and ate, and yes, relieved themselves in the most human way possible. They are a reminder that no matter how high the walls or grand the palaces are, it is the small, unassuming details of life that truly make a civilization come alive. In the bustling city of Cairo, amidst the chaos and the crowds, there is a hidden oasis of tranquility. It's a place where history comes to life and where the spirit of ancient Egypt lingers. Today, we're going to put our differences aside, because here in the 21st century, every human being is equal, and we do one thing equally. But have you ever wondered how people went to the bathroom in ancient times? Come with me on a journey to the past and discover what secrets the ancient toilets are hiding. Let's get started. Part 4. Comparison with other texts. Come with me on a tour around the ancient world to see how kings, people in other lands, went to the toilet. We start from the Far East in China. The documents in the records of the Grand Historian and many court records show that Chinese emperors did not use stone chairs like pharaohs, but used luxurious rings called convenient tools. Some rings were made of brass, some were inlaid with gold, and some were even made of precious jade. These fancy toilets were definitely a symbol of wealth and status. You know, in ancient China, everyone was ranked according to a strict hierarchy, and even the emperors didn't want to break the rules. The lower ranks of society were allowed to squat on plain stone stools, while the upper ranks could afford more comfortable options, such as small wooden boxes with armrests. And the most luxurious ones were reserved for the nobility and the imperial family. Those who had a higher status would ride a special kind of sedan chair when it was time to relieve themselves. It was shaped like a small box with armrests, and the walls were decorated with beautiful paintings. They were carried by 4 servants, 2 carrying the front and 2 carrying the back. These sedan chairs weren't just for going to the toilet, though. They were a status symbol and a way to travel in style. But the emperor's toilet still had its own unique features. The seat itself was padded with soft materials and beautifully decorated. And servants, usually eunuchs, were responsible for presenting the chamber pots and then carrying them away to be disposed of. The urine was used for cleaning, so it was collected in special containers. Emperor Nero's toilet, for example, included a golden chamber pot. In addition, each throne room had a special place for storing these pots. One of the main rules in the palace was that no one except the eunuchs was allowed to touch the contents of the chamber pots. Servants were severely punished if they accidentally dropped the pots. Imagine the scene, and we will see power and class distinctions were not only expressed in the throne, but also in the devices that remained quietly placed at the end. It was a sign that the emperor's business was private and not for everyone to see. Now let's leave Asia and step into ancient Rome. The Romans were famous for their drainage systems and public toilets. Their public bathrooms were places where people could relieve themselves and socialize at the same time. Instead of separate cubicles, the Romans preferred long rows of stone, carved errors placed close together with a continuous stream of water underneath to wash away waste. In the public toilets, the Romans liked to sit close together, chatting and catching up with each other's news. However, unlike the Chinese toilets, Roman toilets were designed for everyone, except the emperor. If you were a Roman emperor, you would have your own private toilet in the palace, but you wouldn't be able to enjoy the luxury of having your chamber pot cleaned by servants. That duty would fall on your wife. At least that was the case with Caligula's wife, Melonia Caesonia, who wasn't happy about her new responsibility. There are records that they sat together on the toilet, discussing state affairs, as if the toilet was also a part of the national parliament. This shows that in Roman culture, community and sharing were important values. But the Romans weren't the only ones with interesting toilet habits. Let's take a look at the Indus River civilization, Mohenjo-Daro, which existed more than 2,500 years BC. Back then, toilets weren't exactly rare, but well-planned sewage systems were unheard of. These toilets played an important role in keeping cities clean and preventing diseases. In Mohenjo-Daro, houses often had their own toilets, connected to drainage channels along the streets. Archaeologists call this one of the earliest urban sanitation systems in the world. This means that even 25 centuries ago, people knew the importance of hygiene and public health. People also valued community and shared facilities. The toilets were located in public areas, and everyone could use them. But there's something interesting. Even though everyone shared the same toilets, there were separate facilities for men and women. Women's toilets were smaller and closer to the ground, while men's toilets were larger and higher up. This suggests that gender roles were already established back then, and women needed less space and privacy than men. In fact, the toilets were built right next to the public baths. So after relieving themselves, people could wash themselves thoroughly. That's why visitors to Mohenjo-Daro were amazed by the city's cleanliness, because everything was thought through and nothing was left to chance. And now back to ancient Egypt. So for China, they did not have gold-studded jewels. So for Rome, they did not have public toilets to discuss state affairs. So for Mohenjo-Daro, they did not have sewers stretching across the streets. But they had something different, the connection between life and spiritual belief. For the Egyptians, toilets were not just a way to solve their needs, but part of the process of keeping the body clean so that the soul could be at peace, so that after death it could gently pass through the gate of Osiris. The connection between the physical and spiritual world was very important to the Egyptians. That's why everything was carefully planned and designed to ensure that both the living and the dead felt comfortable. The toilets were not hidden in secluded places, but were built in the open air, surrounded by gardens and greenery. This created a peaceful atmosphere and helped people relax while doing their business. The Egyptians believed that the toilet was a sacred place where the body was purified, and they treated it with respect and care. So why are we talking about toilets? Because toilets are more than just bathroom fixtures. They reflect a society's beliefs, customs, and technologies. They tell us how people lived, worked, and interacted with each other. By studying toilets, we learn more about the history of humanity. Let's think about it. Toilets are found in every corner of the globe, from the palaces of kings to the homes of ordinary people. They come in all shapes and sizes, from simple stone holes to modern high-tech seats. But no matter how different toilets may seem, they all serve the same purpose. They're a testament to human ingenuity and adaptability. In the past, people had to walk long distances to find a secluded spot to relieve themselves. But as civilizations developed, toilets became more sophisticated. The ancient Greeks invented the flush toilet, which was a major breakthrough in public sanitation. The Romans improved on the Greek design, creating a network of public bathrooms throughout their empire. During the Middle Ages, toilets fell out of favor as sanitation systems declined. But during the Industrial Revolution in the 18th and 19th centuries, they made a comeback. Today, toilets are considered essential fixtures in any home or public building. They've become a symbol of modern convenience and comfort. But not all toilets are created equal. In some parts of the world, people still don't have access to basic sanitation facilities. This is a major public health issue that affects millions of people. Many people have to walk long distances to find a toilet, which puts them at risk of disease and makes it difficult to maintain hygiene. The World Health Organization estimates that nearly 1/4 of the world's population doesn't have access to basic sanitation facilities. This includes more than 660 million people who have to defecate in the open. Lack of access to toilets can have serious consequences for individuals and communities. It can lead to health problems, social stigma, and discrimination. That's why it's important for governments and organizations to work together to improve sanitation systems around the world. Everyone deserves access to clean water and sanitation. What does this mean for us? It means that we should appreciate the convenience and comfort that toilets bring to our lives every day. It also means that we need to be aware of the challenges faced by people who don't have access to basic sanitation facilities. And it reminds us that even in the smallest things, there's a lot to be grateful for. In the end, we're all human beings. And despite all our differences, we all have one thing in common. the need to go to the bathroom. We're all equal in that regard. If you're an ancient Egyptian, what would your daily life be like? Honestly, it's hard to say because there aren't many traces left. We can only guess based on the remnants of civilization. However, from the stones in the Egyptian palaces to the precious gems in the Chinese imperial court and the public squares in Rome, or the smart drainage system in Mohenjo-daro, we can draw a simple conclusion. Wherever people always find ways to turn the smallest needs into a part of civilization. For ancient Egypt, it also has a spiritual color. The ancients believed that the body must be clean for the soul to be at peace. A stone chair in the palace not only was where the pharaoh sat down like anyone else, but also proved the concept. Keep the body pure so that the soul is accepted in the afterlife. This is reflected very clearly in the funeral texts, such as the Book of the Dead, where souls must answer 42 gods with purity commitments. Among them, many of the oaths are related to the cleanliness of the body, as if going to the toilet properly and cleanly is also a part of morality, of preparing for the afterlife. From here, modern archaeologists realize that stone cups, seemingly small and light, are evidence of a disciplined, rule-based lifestyle and deep faith. People see that power and spirituality are not only in the pyramids, in the plot, or in the monument, but also in the most ordinary objects. If you look back, you can imagine a majestic pharaoh, after a solemn sacrificial ceremony, entering a small room, sitting down on the cold stone ring, a simple and ordinary scene. It makes us realize that all of us, whether kings or commoners, share very human moments of overcoming. And perhaps it is this quiet equality that is the red thread connecting all civilizations. A world of simple needs, cleanly covered by the belief in purity, in the endless cycle of life and death. But the busy life still has to go on. How did the ancient Egyptians solve the problem of going to the bathroom? Along the corridors of the palace, you will easily find public restrooms with guards standing outside. Because the king's palace is not only a place of work, but also a place of residence for officials and their families. So public toilets are indispensable. These toilets are usually built near the corners of the palace walls. The walls are carefully plastered and whitewashed to give it the cleanest impression possible. Because according to Egyptian beliefs, the journey to the afterlife is not easy. If the deceased is impure, they cannot enter the kingdom of the gods. In addition, toilets are also considered an integral part of a house, especially in wealthy families. They're usually built in the backyard, close to the bedrooms and living rooms. The materials for building toilets are quite diverse, from wood, stone, mud brick to marble. Toilets are designed as holes dug in the ground, sometimes equipped with benches or more sophisticated seats. Interestingly, in the toilets, you will often find small holes near the baseboard, which is actually a ventilation duct connected to the sewer system underneath. Toilets are also places for washing. There are often small pools next to them for people to clean themselves before and after using the toilet. Water is transported to these pools through an underground channel system that brings water from the Nile River. Another interesting fact is that the ancient Egyptians invented a special tool for cleaning called a bidet. It was a wooden box about 1.5 meters long with a large hole in the middle. Instead of toilet paper, the ancient Egyptians used a small stick made of wood or metal. Sometimes the rich would use pieces of linen cloth. In any case, this is much more hygienic than the hands, because at that time, the hands were often stained with ink or paint when working. It can be said that the ancient Egyptians were very sophisticated when it came to dealing with excretion. They knew that keeping their bodies clean was not only a matter of aesthetics, but also a matter of faith, health, and courtesy. And that's what we're talking about today. Thank you for watching. See you soon. Goodbye. Tonight, as I fall asleep, I laugh and think that even Pharaoh, in the eternity of Egypt, may have had moments of life as ordinary as ours. And it is that ordinary life that makes them closer to us than ever.